Hey, we're back again with book review number 5. This time we're looking at Why the Museum Matters. For those of you who are new here, this is at curiouser.and.curiouser.51 on both YouTube and Instagram. YouTube, obviously. This channel discusses museums, museum overviews, museum ASMR, and really anything and everything about museums. And once a week, I post book reviews that relate to museums. I know I said museums a lot, but that's kind of the point. So over the last few weeks, I've had, 4 weeks to be precise, I've had other book reviews that I've done that you can check out on my channel. Last week was The Art of Relevance by Nina Simon. That was a nonfiction book. The week before that was At the Louvre, which was a poetry book. Then we had a fiction book, When the Museum is Closed. And of course, the last and final first book review was Meet Me at the Museum, which was another fiction book. So this week is a nonfiction book. I figured since last week we did one, we'll do another one this week. So again, I want to make museums less intimidating, and by doing so, I tend to read a lot of books about museums and what's going on in the current climate of museums. But what that means is basically in my free time, I read a bunch of books that relate to museums and either their collections, public engagement, fundraising, really any aspect that I can find. So this week's book has a little bit of everything, which is why I wanted to cover it. This book focuses mostly on art museums, as it was written by the CEO of the Metropolitan Museum of Art located in New York. And a lot of the previous books that I have been reading dealt with the more European-centric model of museums rather than American-centric. So I thought it would be a good change of pace. So this week is Why the Museum Matters by Daniel H. Weiss. Art museums have played a vital role in our culture, drawing on Enlightenment ideals in shaping ideas, advancing learning, fostering community, and providing spaces of beauty and permanence. In this thoughtful and often personal volume, Daniel H. Weiss contemplates the idea of the universal art museum alongside broad considerations about the role of art in society and what defines a cultural experience. Weiss reflects on the difficulties art museums face, from their financial health to their collecting practices, to the audiences they engage, to ensuring freedom of expression on the part of artists and curators. Weiss's optimistic view of the future sees the museum serving a greater public while continuing to be a steward of culture and a place of discovery, discourse, inspiration, and pleasure. This poignant question and affirmation of the museum explores our enduring values while embracing the need for change in the rapidly evolving world. So the blurb mentions a little bit of everything, and as I mentioned before, this book covers a wide range of topics in museums, from collections, public engagement, audience, visitors, fundraising. As I cover this book, I plan on just going through a brief and very broad description of why the museum matters, hence the title, and not getting too much into specifics, as again, this could go down a whole rabbit hole and a whole other video on collecting practices as well as repatriation and decolonization. I made quite a few notes in this book, and it really is an interesting book. It's only 168 pages, and it took me about 2 hours to read. But the main focus of this book is to make museums, I feel, less intimidating, as it talks about the behind-the-scenes work that museums have to do. An example of this, as I wrote down from a note from this book, is that museums are meant to serve their communities. This gets into how museums have to reflect their communities and how they get more people involved and engaged and coming into their exhibitions so they can raise money for future exhibitions. I thought this was really interesting and important, as museums have to focus on a lot of contemporary issues in pop culture, as well as the political climate and other cultures across the globe that they may not properly represent. But again, this begs the whole question of repatriation and decolonization, so we won't get too much into that. But on this topic, I do want to say that museums have a wide range of people that go into the process of repatriation and decolonization. Recently, I had mentioned in a previous video that there was a drum that got returned to its home country from France. This, of course, had to go through museum boards, it had to go through trustees, it had to go through curators, conservationists. Basically, anyone and everyone who could be involved in this repatriation process was involved. This book does a good job of explaining how it's not just as simple as saying, hey, let's return this object to its rightful country. It has to go through a whole process, and it often takes months or years to get it returned. I know there are a lot of thoughts and opinions on this, but for now we're just going to leave it there. Another reason I picked this book is a lot of the books that I have been reading deal more with the European-centric model of museums as opposed to the American-centric model. This book might be a little biased, as it is written by the CEO of the Metropolitan Museum of Art located in New York. But it does cover the Louvre as well as the British Museum. In my opinion, it's difficult to find an unbiased book when it comes to museums, as you're either going to be looking at museums from Asia, Europe, America, Australia. And of course, there's always the debate of what is the right way to display objects or what is the right way to run a museum. So that's why I like sharing these books and reading all different kinds of books that have to do with museums, as everyone has a different perspective and an interesting take. And I think it's important to learn from not just the communities around us, but other institutions as well. Now, this book does touch on some sensitive issues, but that is par for the course when it comes to museums, as they are often representative or reflective of society. But overall, the book is written very academically, and it does provide sources and examples. This is why I thought the book was interesting, as it doesn't just say, this is my opinion, I believe this is the right way. It gives a more broad view of what others might think, or even a perspective from the audience members as well as the board and the CEO of certain museums. This is very important when talking about museums, as there are a lot of moving parts. It's not just the head curator, it's also the conservationists, it could be the front of house staff, and even people working in the gift shop. It's very important to understand that museums are a community endeavor, not just the community that it represents, but the community within the museum itself, such as the staff. Again, this is what makes the book interesting, as it discusses a lot of issues that have come up recently in the past 10 or so years. So overall, I think this book is a really great book, and again, it's important to see other perspectives from either Europe or America or Asia or wherever you want to look for museum related content. Again, this book is really interesting as it was more American centered for American museums, but again, this goes back to the importance of reading from different perspectives. So overall, I think it was a pretty good book. I believe I got this book at Waterstones. It is probably available at Barnes & Noble, Books A Million, Topping Company, and again, really short. So I hope you enjoyed this very brief overview, and if there's a museum book that you would like me to cover, just let me know in the comments. I will not be giving away what I will be reviewing next week, as I have a lot of books in mind, and I am currently reading about 3 that have to do with museums. So again, this channel is about making museums less intimidating, one book review at a time and one visit at a time. That means discussing books on how museums can be more inclusive to their audience members. It also means discussing books on how collections can reflect the community, or what options there are for fundraising, whether that be pay-as-you-will days. But really, I'd like to cover anything and everything to do with all perspectives and aspects of museums from around the world. So hopefully you like this review. This was Why the Museum Matters by Daniel H. Weiss. Next week's book will be a secret, as I don't even know what I'm going to cover next week. If you have any suggestions, let me know in the comments. Again, this is curiouser.and.curiouser.51 on Instagram and YouTube. My YouTube is updated every Sunday, book review once a week, and my shorts are updated on Sunday. Instagram has reels and posts sporadically throughout the week, so hopefully you enjoyed. Here's to making museums less intimidating, one book at a time. Thanks for watching!